So I'm Ash. I'm Director of Developer Relations at Nylas. We're a SaaS API company that provides a single API platform for you to connect to all of the email and calendar providers out there. And that's about most of what I'll say about it today. We're going to use it as a little bit of an example, but we won't dive in deep because we really want to focus on the AI side. If you want to connect, my LinkedIn's up there as well as my email address. Whoops, here we go. All right, so about a year ago, I wrote on my blog some notes about experimenting with AI and developer relations. Kind of thinking through, like, I was hearing a lot of really good ideas from our docs team. Shout out to Laura over there, by the way, on our docs team, and our developer advocates who were coming up with awesome ideas for product features with AI. But it felt like there were some other things we could be doing as well. We're a developer relations team after all, so we could probably be focusing in some other areas. And I won't enumerate those here. If you do happen to be interested in using AI in DevRel, I have a blog post right there that you can check out. But one of the key aspects of that post was really this, which was focus on the mere mortal developer. Sure, if we end up with AI features in our API, of course we'll try to help developers build on those, right? That's what we do. But at the same time, like, developers are out there today integrating our APIs, and there's also all these like AI models and services out there as well, and they're already going to be working on using those, most likely. They're experimenting already. How can we help? So we started thinking a little bit, first of all, like, what do we mean by the mere mortal developer, right? So you might be a mere mortal developer if you code, but you aren't an LLM expert like me. If you want to sprinkle some AI magic into your application, like I do, and if you want to learn by doing as opposed to reading all the white papers out there. Nothing wrong with research, but quite honestly, like, that's just never my entry point into most things in life. Lots of respect for people who can go that route. So we wanted to focus on those folks, and we started thinking, okay, cool. Nylas offers email APIs and calendar APIs. What are some things we could do? And we just wanted to come up with basic sample applications that we could say, hey, here's a repo, developers, check it out. We came up with ideas like email triagers, email autoresponders, email summarizers, or I put that twice, but one of them should be email summarizer, and calendar chat, right? Nothing mind-blowing here, but that's the point. What we're trying to do is meet developers where they are, because we are them, and we want to just say, like, hey, let's try some stuff out like this, and we'll get to the good stuff as we go. So we're actually going to pick up that missing one from the list, and we're going to have a look at just a basic example of building an email summarizer. And the point here is not the email, but like on the other side, what we're going to dig into in the code itself is how we're actually calling all the different AI models. Because some of the points that were made this morning in the talks were, kind of like you're orchestrating across all these different services. They all speak differently. There's not really like a common, footprint for how you talk to an AI model across all the different surfaces and services. So I want to show that off here today. The end result will be this. The UI is not the point. The words on the page are not the point. But what you can see is I'm pulling in all my emails from Gmail using Nylas, and then you kind of see an email inbox type layout, and under that is a summary of what's in that message. And it's translating into English when the original email might not have been in English. So under the hood, here's what we're doing. We have an app server in the middle. The server is writing all of this in Node.js with TypeScript. And so on that server, the first thing we're going to do is, if the client makes a GET request to our server, the email service is the first thing that gets triggered. We'll talk about what that means in a minute. But it reaches out to Nylas, and it pulls in all of my emails from Gmail. So that's the first step. Then the email service is going to pass things off to an LLM service, just a Node.js class that I've built on the back end. And it's going to get that email data ready to be handed off to the LLM service elsewhere and get that summary back. And then finally, in the response to that original GET request, it's going to show all of that in the browser. Cool. So this is the first thing we're going to have a look at is this email service.js. It's just a class. We're not going to dive into the deep details of what Nylas is doing here. I just want to point out that one line there, you can see that we have the constant messages is awaiting nylus.messages.list Inside of that, all we're passing is an identifier that represents the user, the logged in user, and then query parameters, like how many emails do I want to get? That's the limit, and then where am I getting them in the inbox? So that's all we're doing on the Nylas side. Once we have all of that data, now my application just needs to sort of massage that into something that will be useful when I make the LLM call. So we're not going to go through all this code. The main thing I'm showing you here is that we're just wrangling an object from one thing to another thing so we can pass it along. So Nylas gives us that email parameter that you can see at the top of the function there, and we're just yanking out some properties like date, body, subject, from, and to, putting those into a format that will then be used with the LLM. All right, so let's check out this LLM service. Again, this is a Node.js service in my application, so this isn't, like something out on the web or anything like that. We'll get to that in just a second. But first, we got to prep so we can get ready to make those API calls. So just make a generic class, first of all, that gets us ready to call LLMs. So you'll see that this class in and of itself doesn't really do anything. The main thing it's doing is getting that generate prompt message in place, it'll generate the prompts anytime we have an instance of this class or a class that extends it. So we'll have a look at what that looks like here in just a moment, but first, show us your prompt already, right? So we talked a lot about getting better at prompting LLMs this morning. And this is a pretty basic attempt at that. There are a lot of other ways to go about doing this kind of stuff, and certainly I find compelling the notion of using an AI to prompt an AI. It's interesting. For our purposes here, this is what we're doing. We're just passing in some stuff from that prepared email, right? Remember, we had that email service that kind of massaged the data into something that gets us ready for the LLM. So here we go. Now we're going to move on to passing the data to the LLM services, right? This is the more interesting bit, and then getting those summaries back. So this is the part where we get to make some LLM API calls. We'll look at some code first. All right, so this is the OpenAI service. You knew it was coming. You knew we would talk about OpenAI at some point. It won't be the only one we talk about, but since everyone probably has at least passing familiarity, but with this group I assume probably more than that, this is a good place for us to just have a look. So we're using the OpenAI Node.js SDK, and I'll just call out a couple of things here. One, you can see that this class, this OpenAI service, is extending that LLM service. So, given that it's a class, what that means is, it's inheriting the prompt generation method that we looked at a moment ago. And that's super important because now we have this function here that's going to call, it's going to summarize that prepped email. And you can see the first line there is calling that generate prompt method that comes from the LLM service class. So after that, we tee it up, and this is the meat of it. Now we are calling the this.llm.chat. The LLM in this case is OpenAI, because that's what we set in the constructor just above. You can see that this.llm equals OpenAI. So that's just the Node.js SDK. And we pass in what model are we going to use, and then what messages we're passing in. So here we go. I'm going to do the thing that we all try to avoid, but I'm not that smart, so we're going to do it anyways. Here we go. So this is the application. It's running live on my laptop. If Wi-Fi works out, then what is going to happen when I refresh? You're going to see this pulling in real time from that email, and it may take a second. But GPT 3.5 is usually relatively fast. I do want to show you one that's even slower in just a second. But let's see. It may well die on my conference Wi-Fi. You can do it. There we go. All right, so this is actually coming straight from my, let's just talk through the application one more time. It went to Gmail via Nylas, pulled in all my emails, massaged that data into something that could then be prepped to hand off to the LLM, and then got the response, and now we're showing it in the client. There are ways to make this better, right, in terms of not having it block for a quick demo in a talk. I think this is sufficient, but you wouldn't ship this in an application. Either way, one of the cool parts is you can see the subject line, right? Some of these emails are coming to me in Japanese, and I didn't bother translating the subject line because that's not the point, but the summary ends up getting translated, which I think is pretty neat. Not all models handle this as well. Some of them don't handle it at all, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But with this drop down here, I'm going to do this to myself again. And now we're going to call out to Mistral via Hugging Face, and wow, that one's like super fast. Also, sometimes the summaries are questionable. You'll get interesting artifacts and stuff. This is a matter of dialing in your prompts and all that kind of thing. Now, here's the one that we probably won't sit here and wait to finish. I'm running this right here is a MacBook Air M2. And what I've done is put Ollama on my machine, and this is not making a network call. It's actually running against a model that's actually on my laptop right now. It won't surprise you that this is going to take a while. Again, we're not going to wait on it. It's not horrible, but what's really fun about this is like this is local to my laptop or my application. There's the future in there somewhere, right? And on my Mac Studio at home, it's a lot better. Oh, by the way, I only passed in 2 emails because I wanted to make it a little faster, so I'm cheating on this one. If it were 6, you can imagine we'd still be waiting. So anyways, that's the demo. It actually worked, and I'm really pleased. So thank you. Just doing a quick time check here. All right, so great. Let's do some code comparison. The point is, even if this is small, the point is not to show you word for word what this code is doing. You'll be able to access the slides anyways. The point is to see that the shape of these things, even if you just like blur your eyes and like look, kind of cross-eyed at it, it's not the same, right? Like you can even tell like the stuff that I'm returning in terms of the generated text, like if you look at those return lines alone, they're all different. So OpenAI is like response.choices. It's the 0th element of an array. And then I got to dial in and do like message.content. Hugging Face, a little easier to get to, just doing response.generated text. Ollama, response.message.content. The way you make the API call as well, if you look just above in all those situations, is a little bit different. So it's worth knowing about. In most cases, you're probably not integrating 3 different services in your application. Maybe you are. I'd love to know if you're doing that, and I'd like to know what you're doing. But it's just worth knowing that, kind of going into it, you're going to be learning a different way of talking to an LLM depending on which service you're working with. So wait, what are these services? We didn't even talk about that, right? We wanted to learn by doing, not read a bunch of stuff up front. So I wanted to hold this off until pretty close to the end. Okay, so chances are you've heard of these. I'm just going to give you like the very high level sort of take. So OpenAI, right? This one needs no introduction, but it would have been weird if I didn't put something here and I introduced the other 2. So that's where you can go to learn more. As a developer, well known for GPT-4 and Whisper and all kinds of stuff. Their dev site's actually really cool. I had checked it out in a little bit, but it's definitely come along over the last year. And their cloud APIs. Why am I calling that out? Because compared to Hugging Face, which is a community-centric AI hub, I've heard it referred to as the GitHub of AI. And it's, you can go there and get models and data sets and all kinds of cool stuff. They offer cloud APIs, but you can also run this stuff locally. There's a library out there called Transformer.js. I'll link you to a podcast that with the person who created Transformer.js that really gets into the weeds on that stuff. It's super cool because it's not just Node.js. These things run in the browser now. I haven't even tried that part of it yet because I like being on the back end personally, but I think that's wild. And then Ollama, which kind of presents initially as a CLI, but it comes with the REST API under the hood. And so I was just using their library to talk to my install of Ollama on my machine. So those are just some of your options out there. These are not the only 3 by any stretch of the imagination, but I think just kind of looking at going from something entirely proprietary to something that's community-based, also things that are purely cloud APIs versus a mix of, can I also do this locally to my application, wherever it is? Okay, so under the hood, this was the application. We had a look at it, and we saw that we pulled in the emails. Our email service did stuff for us to get that email ready to be passed off to the LLM. Then we receive the response, hand it off to the user. So an LLM checklist for mere mortal developers. These are just things that I was telling myself as I've been digging into this on my own. So first up is define your task, because if you've tried this yet, what you will realize at step one is you have to know whether or not are you doing text generation? Are you doing text-to-text generation? Are you doing summarization? The interesting part in this case was that I never really found a model that would jibe with like how I was trying to summarize emails with a summarization task. So I actually had to switch over to text generation through a lot of like kind of banging against my computer and a little bit of tears. So there's a lot of like playing around up front, but like it's good to know like what are you trying to do, because that's already going to dictate which direction you move in. You're doing stuff with audio, obviously you're going to go down a totally different path. Next up is choose your service. Are you using OpenAI, Hugging Face, Olama, anything else that's out there? The chances are at the very beginning, if you're just building a project on your own, you just want to find something that you know you can work with, right? What feels best for you. You can always come back and modify that later. After that, you got to choose your model. Again, not only the task, but then like which model performs that task. And this again was a lot of trial and error for me. And a lot of learning how to kind of like read some of these kind of sometimes inscrutable readmes about what these models are doing. So there's that. Next, you prep your data, devise your prompt, and handle the output. We talked about that. What we didn't talk about, and what honestly I'm not really here to give you the answer for, is like, how do you tune the LLM to your own users' data, right? Like, how's that gonna work? If you have 100,000 users using your email summarizer, is there something, if you were, let's say for example, you were building an autoresponder instead, if you wanted to have all those auto responses in the tone of that user's previous emails, how's that gonna work? Same for storing evolving user preferences. So I built a spam detector once with an LLM, and that's super cool. It's actually really good. But at the same time, you do want to teach it over time. But if you're doing that in your application, like that's kind of now your job to figure out like how do you let the user teach it. And also managing cost is a big one too. So it's really cool that we can run these things locally to our applications, but how do we do it? And that kind of thing. And what's it going to run us versus paying for OpenAI? Cool, so this is basically the end of the talk. It's all in the repo. So if I just I'll click out of this for just a second, but you can go check out the repo here. It has a README. I will get you setup instructions before the end of the day. But the reason I wanted to show you this is there's a bunch of resources here, including like Syntax FM, talking with the developer of Transformer.js. This is a really good podcast. There's also stuff where our CTO talked to Evan Morikawa at OpenAI and did a webinar there. I have some of my blog posts, some of the developer advocate blog posts as well from us. So I think all those things are worth checking out. And I'll put this up here once more so you can snap a photo of the URL, but that's all from me. Thank you so much.